Alright, this is section 7.3 on the percent equation. Now we just learned the percent proportion, and that's x over 100 equals part over total. I prefer the proportion. However, this textbook does present the same idea as an equation, that the part equals the percent times the whole. However, the percent, this has to be a decimal first. So I personally do not recommend the equation. I think it's harder to remember, and you have to convert the percentage before you plug it in. And students tend to forget to do that part. So if you would like to try the equation, that's okay. However, you have to be able to remember one of these two. And I personally think it's easier to remember the proportion than to remember the equation and that the percent has to be a decimal first. So it is your choice. I'm going to do just a few examples. I can show you the equation, but I don't think you're going to like it. I think most students prefer the proportion. So I'll do a couple of these with the equation, but then I'm going to solve them with the proportion. So here are just some examples. They're going to sound very similar to the ones that we just did in the previous video, and they are the same, but they can be solved either with the equation right here or with the proportion like we did in section 7.2. So example 1, what is 10% of $110.38? If we were going to use the equation is that the part equals the percent times the whole, or the total. So the percent is going to be 0.10, 10%. The whole is 110.38. And if I multiply those together, it will give me the part. 0.10 times 110.38. And we get the answer, $11.038, which is about $11.04. Now I found that to be much more difficult than setting up the proportion like we're used to and cross multiplying. So if we were to set up the proportion like we did in 11.2, we would have 10 over 100 equals x, because it says is is your total, 110.38. And then you would cross multiply 110.38 times 10 and divide by 100, and you get to the same answer, $11.04. So I find the proportion much easier to work with. I find the equation hard to remember and hard to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and use the proportion each time. And if you'd like to try the equation and you'd like some additional support, you can go in your textbook, Chapter 7, Section 3. But I'm going to keep solving these with the proportion. So it says, what is 1% of that same amount, $110.38? So I would do 1 out of 100 equals x out of 110.38. So that would give me 1 times that value, which is that value, divided by 100. This gives me $1, which is about $1.10 if we were to solve for x. Same idea here, 20% of 34 pounds is how many pounds? So 20 out of 100 equals x out of 34. 20 times 34 divided by 100. X equals 6.8. I believe it's in pounds. Yep, 6.8 pounds. So these are going to solve very similar to how we did in section 7.2. So 2% of 34 pounds is how many pounds? So 2 out of 100 equals x out of 34. 2 times 34 and then divide by 100. That's going to give us 0.68 pounds. Now the textbook teaches kind of a shortcut for 1% or 10% or 2% or 20%. There are some shortcuts, but as you know, I'm not a big fan of shortcuts because you have to remember when to use them and how to use them and how to remember to use it the normal way. So my suggestion again, stick with that proportion every single time. It will get you to your answer. And the more you use the same thing, the more your brain will remember one method that works every single time. So example 5, 15% of $165 is how much? I think this is the same question we did in section 7.2, so I'm going to solve it the same way we did. Of means total, so of's on the bottom. 165 times 15 divided by 100 is $24.75. So some of your homework questions are going to seem very repetitive because the textbook wants you to use this new equation. I say use the proportion, you'll get to the same answer. And the last few, again, very similar. 8 pounds is what percent of 160 pounds? So we're looking for the percentage. We have 8 out of 160. We're going to cross multiply and get 8 times 100 divided by 160. And that's going to be 5, not pounds, percent. Ooh, I'm getting sloppy. Sorry about that. X equals 5% because we're looking for the percent. So 5% is 8 out of 160. Example 7, what percent of 50 is $38? So X out of 100 equals 38 out of 50. 38 times 100 divided by 50. And I got 76%. And finally, example 8, 216 calculators is 60% of how many calculators? So 60 out of 100 equals 216 out of X. So of how many? So 100 times 216 divided by 60. So X equals 360 calculators. So is and of still come into play on these problems. So again, very similar, same setup. If you can remember the percent proportion, you can solve all the problems in Chapter 7, and that is what I would recommend. I'm going to go ahead and get started in Section 7.4. I might pause halfway through it. These are a little bit more involved problems. They have a little bit more words to them. However, if you can remember to set up the proportion and solve, you'll be just fine. So these problems are a little bit more detailed, but the same idea. I'm going to go through these 4 examples, and then I think I'll save the second half as a separate video. So it says about 65% of students at the City Center College receive financial aid. How many of the 9,280 students enrolled are receiving aid? So of that many, that means that's the total. So 65 out of 100 equals X out of 9,280. Cross multiply and divide. So 9,280 times 65 divided by 100, I got 6,032 students. So the problems are a little bit longer to read, but you still set them up consistently. There were 50 points on the first math test. Hugh's score was 83% correct. How many of the points did he earn? So 50 points was the total. So 83 out of 100 equals how many out of 50? So we're going to do 83 times 50 divided by 100, and you should get 41.5 points. So he got 41.5 out of 50, which translated to an 83% correct. Example 3, the Los Angeles Lakers made 47 of 80 free throw attempts. What percent is this? And we're going to round to the nearest whole percent. So, x out of 100, because we're asking for the percentage, equals 47 out of 80. Cross multiply 47 times 100 divided by 80 is 58.75. It says to round to the nearest percentage, so that's going to be 59%. They do that in sports a lot. They take their stats and they convert them into percentages. And then example 4, a frozen dinner advertises that only 18% of its calories come from fat. If a dinner contains 55 calories from fat, how many total calories are in the dinner? So 18 out of 100 come from fat, which is 55 out of how many? So this one you have to be consistent, fat over total. And so we have to be consistent here, calories from fat over total. And then we cross multiply and divide. 100 times 55, 18 times x. 55 times 100 divided by 18 is going to give us x equals 305.5 repeating, and we usually round off to the nearest calories, so maybe 306 calories. It will tell you how to round on each problem in your homework. So these word problems have a little bit more to them, but consistent setup with the ones we were doing previously will still get you to the correct answer. Just read carefully to see if you're solving for a percentage or an actual value. I'm going to pause there. We're only halfway done with section 7.4, but I think it's a good place to pause.